Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome again, especially to all the people that might be watching online. It's lovely to have you with us in these interesting times that we're all in Delta Level 2. We don't have a public forum this evening. I should say particularly warm welcome to Mr. Pete from Queensland. It's great that you could join the meeting.
Thank you.
So, yes, it's good to have you. We don't have anyone in the public forum today, so we'll...
Can I just ask if I can record the meeting?
I don't have a problem with that.
I'm getting a picture of the Dunedin City Council's website. Tiara Maori Week, Language Week has come up. I've got no video of you.
If you start watching it on the website, Brian, you might find that it's confusing because there is a delay. So you'd be better to just watch it on your computer.
It's your homepage. Your homepage has come up. That's all I've got.
Have you got sound?
There is a link. It's live stream, and Paul said that it's live stream.
I've only got. I had you all here before, but all of a sudden, all I've got is the homepage of the DCC. It's come up. Well, I dare to try and get rid of it.
I think we might need to just press on. What we're going to do is, because those of you who've been on Zoom meetings before will know it's a bit challenging. So the best thing to do is to mute, put yourself on mute until it's your turn to speak, or if you need to speak, there is a little icon down the bottom.
Yep, you've come back.
There's a little icon down the bottom that you can, it clicks and you can get a hand up, but some people prefer just to stick their hand up in front of the camera like that, but you need to be right in front of the camera so I can see you, and we'll go that way. So if you'd just like to mute until we get to those points, that would be awesome.
Yeah, okay.
Are you okay now there, Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I've got your back. Yeah, fine. Can you hear me all right, I suppose?
Yes, I can, but if you'd just like to mute your microphone now until as we press on.
Touch wood. Let's go.
Thank you. We have no apologies. So we're moving to confirmation of the agenda. So I'd like to move that we confirm the agenda without addition or alteration. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Philippa.
Could I speak to that, please?
Well, we've just had a seconder. So yes, certainly.
I'd just like to move that item 7 be temporarily removed from today's agenda, and the reasons for moving it is that there appears to be a challenge or confusion that the report is not completely true and correct, and that Mrs. Van Ziel preferred construction material on the wall, and it appears that she has no right of reply. But I would propose, if we can temporarily put it back, that the two groups actually meet and iron out their differences in the report, and that both parties agree to re-presenting a joint report to the board to our November meeting, and any other outcome that they may have from such a meeting.
So you're moving that?
Yes.
Yeah, I would second that, please.
Okay.
Brian.
Brian Pete has seconded it. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, well, I've moved it. Yeah, the discussion is that there's no right of reply or anything like that, and there's quite a bit of confusion about, and I think these people need to get together and have a good discussion and come up with something and report back to us, as the two lots have a joint report to us at our next meeting, so that we can actually get on with it. Otherwise, it's a bit one-sided, I think, the way it is at the moment. So that's my thoughts on it.
Thank you. Brian Pete?
Yeah, just in adding to that, from my perspective, I just agree with what Brian is saying, and also add to it that I just received quite a disturbing email from Margaret this morning, which I haven't been able to send on, and she's received some not very nice feedback from community, saying that she had asked for a brick or a block wall And that's where the confusion is. And she's very disturbed and very upset about getting messages from the public saying that she supported a brick or a block wall. And that's what really needs to be sorted. And as Brian said, there seems to be just disagreement. And I think we need to get the groups together and then come up with a final report of what's going to happen with this wall. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Other speakers? Yeah. So we'll need to,
I've just got my, could I ask a question, or are we at a question time?
we're debating now. Yeah.
Debating. Okay. All right. Well, can I say something then at this time?
Yep.
But it might need to be, it would be good if, I believe Scott is on this Zoom. It would be really good to get some feedback from him on this, because my understanding is, but I could be wrong on this, but even if we approve this to move forward, it just means that it puts it into progress and starts the process. And then my understanding is council staff would work with the parties to get the wall completed. So if there was complete confusion or disagreement around what was needed, i.e. around a brick wall, would they not negotiate that during that process? That would be my understanding of that, but I could be wrong.
Thank you, councillor. Mr. McLean, would you like to speak to this, please?
Thank you, if I may. Yeah, so this report is just for noting. It's an update. It's an operational project led by Parks. So I'm updating the board. There are no decisions to be made by the board. This is purely an operational project, and I was asked to provide an update as to where we're at, which I will do when the paper arises.
Thank you for that clarification. So are there any other speakers? We just need to be voting on whether this amendment goes through or not.
Yeah, well, if no one else got a comment, I'll probably allow the final comment.
Yes. No, you can't on an amendment, apparently, Mr. Miller.
I can't make a final comment.
Not on an amendment. I'm advised that not on an amendment.
On the amendment?
She's just checking that you don't have a right to reply on an amendment.
What's the amendment? I didn't hear it. I'm sorry.
You're moving an amendment to what's already been presented, which was that we
moving a motion, not an amendment, a motion.
No, Mr. Miller, the chair moved the motion that the board confirm the agenda without addition or alteration. That was seconded by Ms. Bain, and
Right.
You moved an amendment that you temporarily suspend item 7 to the November meeting.
Right.
So would you like me to,
Okay.
would you like me to put the vote, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
So I'll call out your names. If you could reply either yes or no to the amendment that this item 7 be moved to the November board meeting. Philippa Bain.
No.
It's
a no.
Martin Dillon.
No.
Councillor Houlihan.
No.
Mr. Miller.
I support the amendment.
Mr. Pate.
Yes, I support the amendment.
Madam Chair.
No.
That's 5-2. So it's
The
lost.
The amendment is lost. So we go back to the original.
That's all right. That's all right. We've just got it appears we've got something in front of us that's not true and correct, but that's all right.
There's no debate.
There isn't any more debate on this now, Brian. Could you please, if you're not able to mute your computer, then I'll have to ask the GSO here, Claire, to do it for you. So we're now going back to the original motion, which was that the board notes the report on the memorial wall, East Taieri Cemetery. It was seconded by Philippa Bain. Call for the vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Just put your hands up, would be great. Yeah. Against?
Okay.
Okay, so
Two against.
Okay.
That's carried. Oh, yeah, here we go. Right, declarations of interest, sorry. Are there any declarations? Does anyone need to update their declarations? That being the case, then I will move that the board notes the elected members' interest register and confirms the proposed management plan for elected members' interests. All those in favour?
What are we talking about? Excuse
Oh,
me.
sorry, I need a seconder.
I'm not getting that clear. What are you voting on?
We're doing declarations of interest.
Oh, righty-o, yeah.
My apologies, I should have done them earlier.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, so I have a seconder, Mr. Dillon. All those in favour?
Aye.
Yep.
That's carried. Confirmation of the minutes. The Mosgiel-Taieri Community Board meeting on the 28th of July. I will move that we confirm the minutes of the Mosgiel-Taieri Community Board on the 28th of July as a correct record. Seconder, please. Thank you, Philippa.
Can I speak to that?
Yep.
It's not recorded, but I actually moved a resolution at the last meeting that the board make a submission to the representation and review, and it was moved, voted and carried. There is no record in the minutes.
got that as an agenda item under the GSO report this evening for you to decide that and go through that.
It is coming up later.
So I apologise if I mistook that, but I've got that under the GSO report for you to do your submission.
Sorry, you took the vote on it.
Yeah. So I'll if people are in agreement, I'll amend the minutes. That's a pure mistake, and I'll amend the minutes accordingly.
All right. So is everyone in agreement that Ms. Sullivan amends the minutes?
Yeah, and also there was you'd have to make a judgment call on this one, but I thought there was a request made by both Martin Dillon and myself, and you made a commitment to get the reports on the roundabout. I thought that should have been in the minutes.
I can provide an update later on.
That's coming through in the GSO report later.
All right.
It was certainly discussed at the agenda meeting.
All right, but there was nothing on the minutes about that.
Yeah, no, we took it on board and we did discuss it, and you'll get an update later on.
Righto.
All right, so that being the case, we will confirm the minutes with the amendment that we've just proposed. Seconder, please. Thank you, Philippa. All those in favour? That's carried. Now we're going to introduce Mr. Phillips, Julian Phillips from the ORC Transport, who's going to give us an update. He will then take questions. Welcome, Julian. Nice to have you with us.
Hi there, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Now, I think I sent you 1 or 2 points that have come through various board meetings over the past little while. So you may have those in front of you, otherwise they may come up in question time. And also, we're looking forward to any updates that you can give us.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Thanks. Can you guys hear me okay?
Perfectly.
Yeah. Just to introduce Abby Chamberlain, who's one of my team members who joined us about 6 months ago. So she's active in some of the stuff I'll be talking about. So I've got your notes in front of me. In terms of a general transport update for Mosgiel area, with the exception of interruptions by COVID, the service is still going kind of gangbusters in terms of patronage, particularly at peak times. So we are actually struggling with capacity at peak times, sort of 8, 9 in the morning, and also from 3 p.m. onwards when kids get on the bus. So at the moment we're running duplicate buses So, 2 buses at a time at those peak times. But also we've identified, through the Shaping Future Dunedin Transport project, that we need more services for Mosgiel, and subject to funding, which we are working on at the moment, we would potentially be looking at introducing higher frequency services, so maybe every 15 minutes instead of half an hour, and also potentially a express service for commuters to get straight into town. We have a number of different items that we put up for funding, and this is one of them. And by the time of the next meeting, I'll be able to give you an update on where we are. But I think there's a reasonable likelihood that we would be adding additional services to Mosgiel to get into the city. You'll also be aware of, there are plans on the horizon in the Shaping Future Dunedin Transport project for a potential park and ride scheme as well. So we've also been looking at that in some detail with our counterparts at DCC, and looking at how the existing bus service could potentially be incorporated into servicing a park and ride scheme as well. I guess the other thing, which is in general about buses, is the B cards that we've been issuing. Which are including being issued at Mosgiel now. So we have 7 different service centres, courtesy of the relationship we have with the DCC. We have something like what's the total number of cards we have issued at the moment?
Just under 110,000.
110,000. That puts us equal or ahead of larger regions such as the Waikato, who have more buses and more population than us. And a huge number of those are registered, which means that people are using them regularly, effectively. And post-COVID, up until this month anyway, unlike a lot of other regions in the country where the patronage has sort of taken a dive because people are maybe a little bit reluctant to go back on the buses after COVID, our patronage has actually recovered. So adjusting for various bits of information I won't bore you with, we are around 1% up on patronage for Dunedin compared to where we were in the last full COVID year, which is 2018-19. You can contrast that with Queenstown, where we're actually at about 60% patronage, because that area has been really heavily hit by the border closures. The other thing that you may be interested in is the fares. So at the moment, we have a $2 fare, which we've been trialling for quite some time. There was a council meeting a few weeks ago where a decision was to be made about where that fare was to land, or what the future of it was. And the interim decision is to keep it as it is, which works out well. So that's the $2 flat fare. Previously, before we introduced that fare in September last year, on an adult, forgot the predecessor of the B card was, Go card. Adult Go card would be around $4.44. So obviously it's significantly cheaper for Mosgiel residents. But that being said, our patronage on Mosgiel was already incredibly high before we introduced the $2 fare. So the fare isn't necessarily the driver for us putting more bus services on in the future. It's just the general popularity of the service since we launched it in its current form back in 2015. COVID has obviously affected things a little bit, but again, we're still running duplicate buses. The buses are still filling up, and we are catering for those peak times, and school children in particular, with extra buses departing from Mosgiel to pick up people who can't fit on existing buses due to space restrictions or anything like that. One of the other items you mentioned on your email was about education sessions and potentially doing something in Mosgiel. And my colleague is not with us here at the moment, Frederic, our comms lead, we're really happy to try and facilitate something or a series of events where we can just help, whether it's getting a stupid goal concession onto a card or just general questions about this, that, and the other. Keen to work with you on that. Another item that's been raised a couple of times, and I think possibly by DCC and yourselves, was about the loop service that runs in central Mosgiel. We've had some feedback about whether we'd be better off running that around Hagar Alexander Drive, because with all the development there, you've got a huge catchment which is kind of being missed a little bit. So that's something we're reviewing and we could possibly do. The reason we need to be careful with it is, although the service itself isn't massively well patronised, you know, if it was a commercial service and we were just looking to make money, we'd probably can it. But because it has a really important social function, it goes directly up to the front gates of a couple of sort of retirement village places on Doon Street and other areas. And it also has that link directly to the medical area of medical centre right on the the west side of town. It has a really important social function, and we would just want to make sure that Hagar Alexander, you know, with the understanding we'd have to put bus stops in and stuff, can give people direct access to that service without reducing, you know, accessibility to the service. I think actually looking at it, talking with officers at DCC, we can do that. But yeah, we'll be able to update on that a bit later by the time of the next meeting. On Hagar Alexander Drive, we've had, I understand you guys have received some feedback about concerns about visibility at the end of the road as it approaches Factory Road. So it's been a matter that's been raised several times over the last 2 or 3 years. I've done at least 2 or 3 site visits with DCC's transport safety guy and talked about it on several occasions. And I know sight lines have been changed by road marking and those sort of measures. And a bus stop was moved slightly in various other things. You know, it's I guess it's a roading issue, but so we would take advice from our colleagues who are our counterparts who are the road controlling authority, but quite happy to raise it again with them. But we have previously taken advice that that intersection with the changes that were made to it is safe. Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly a bus issue. The bus happens to sort of pull in nearby, and therefore it can cause a site, you know, in theory, according to the complaint, it can block sight coming from the left. Yeah, happy to revisit it if it's being raised again. We can talk to that at our next infrastructure meeting with our DCC transport friends, but it's not. I guess just want to outline, it's not a new subject. It is something that's been looked at several times, and I guess I don't want to speak on behalf of, you know, DCC, but we had taken advice that it is now considered safe. But yeah, happy to look at it again. So we also had some questions from a Mosgiel-Taieri Community Voice. And so going through the bullet points they brought up on in order, one of them was to do with what we just talked about, the Factory Road, Hagar Alexander Drive corner, that intersection, whether it's safe or not. Another point was about all what they're saying is all Mosgiel bus stops have no lighting, are in the dark and are unsafe. So I guess the response to that is kind of agree and kind of don't agree. So they're quite correct in that the vast majority of bus stops across the entire of Dunedin do not have internal lighting. We do have some on which have either wired or solar powered lighting in remote areas where there isn't street lighting, like on the way to on Portobello Road on the way to Harrington Point, and further down towards the city on Portobello Road. Also, I believe some on the State Highway 88 on the way to Port Chalmers. But generally, if you look at Gordon Road, for example, if you look at the 10 or so bus stops up and down that street, they are either right next to or in close proximity to street lighting. There will be stops that don't have adequate lighting, and totally accept that. And that's something we've actually discussed earlier today, and we will be looking at how, I think increasingly there will be some demand for that across our network here and in Queenstown. So it's something we'll be considering in our infrastructure discussions, but haven't really got a short answer to that. In that, other than generally we, try and position them near to street lighting wherever possible. Another point they said was Dunedin does not have a large enough population to fund a fully efficient public transport system, so we'll never have a public transport system as evidenced in major cities around the world. So that's it's an interesting viewpoint. I think if we were to contrast ourselves with other cities in New Zealand, we actually have a very efficient and per head, very frequent and cheap service, which is highly specified compared to other regions. But also as a Londoner, and having spent 30 years in London's public transport network, I can say comparatively, my personal view is that the Dunedin one's a lot better than, a lot more efficient, a lot more reliable, and I guess a lot less likely to be stabbed on compared to the London one. There is always going to be difficulties when you have a city of, say, however many there are in Auckland versus 100,000 people in Dunedin and the surrounding areas. Similarly, likewise, London with tens of millions of people, we're always going to be somewhat compromised in terms of what we can do, because we don't have vast reserves of money. But I think what we do offer a very efficient service, and generally from around 2015, and Mosgiel is a very good example of it, the patronage has been climbing year on year for something like 6 or 7 years straight now. And the one way of measuring whether you have a good service or not is if people use it. So if you took, and it's not true that all services across the city are incredibly popular, but given that this is a Taieri board meeting, if you look at the Mosgiel services in isolation, they are so popular to the fact that we're now having to plan, higher frequency, direct express services and so on. So I think in response to the community voice, we don't have the funds of a London or an Auckland, but what we provide is actually a decent high quality and I think fit for purpose for the communities that we serve. We have to bear in mind things that, if you look at the standard of our bus, but for those of you who don't use the bus services, we were one of the first regions, I think, to have 100% super low floor accessible bus fleet, with free Wi-Fi on all the buses. Bike racks, which we mandated. These are all things you don't have to have as part of your minimal specification of a bus. This is stuff we've added on top of, and we've been doing that since 2015. And then gradually across the city, increasing the number of services, the bus hub, e-stops, the apps and things like that. So there is a reasonable level of service. We can always do better, and there's a lot of improvements to be made all over the network. So I'm not sitting here trying to crow and say, well, we're amazing. There's, I don't use the bus every day of the week, and there are reasons for that. And there are levers that we aren't pulling at the moment that we might need to pull in future to get that mode shift that people want, get more and more people on the bus service. But I think, in short, for the size of the communities we serve and with the funds we have, and luckily we have a good relationship with the DCC and so on, and working together, we have some, I think we're doing a reasonably good job. Yes, I pretty much rambled for about 20 minutes. I don't know if you guys have got any questions.
I think, thank you, Julian. That was a very comprehensive report, and thank you for responding to the emails and the queries that I piled up on you and sent out so well. So I'll just open it up to questions now. Who would like to? Carmen, Councillor Houlihan.
Thanks. Yes, I've got a couple of questions. Excuse if my dog barks, sorry, when I'm off muted. Julian, I'm just wondering, I don't know whether you can pinpoint or not, but do you think, I know you sort of mentioned, you know, that the demand was there anyway, but have you got any figures that show what the numbers increased to when the cost lowered to $2 and, you know, before and after, like, because that I'm wondering if that's the direct impact of a lot more people using the bus.
So I don't have them to hand. There's some figures on a data and information committee report on our website that I prepared a couple of weeks ago, which will have a breakdown by what we call units. So that the contracts are broken down into groups of contracts, and the unit that Mosgiel and Brighton is called Unit 5, and it's just those routes. And you can see stats within the report for those individual areas. But the pre-$2 fare, we'd already had these capacity issues anyway. I think the $2 fare definitely makes it more attractive. Yeah, it's yeah, I don't have the figures to hand, but yeah, I can bring them to the next committee meeting as well.
Or email them, maybe. That would be great to know that. That would be really good if possible. Awesome, thank you. Can I just check, would you say that, are you saying there's been quite an increased demand for the last, what, 5 to 7 years or so?
Yeah,
is that what you were saying?
Yeah, generally speaking across the network, it's been, so all the routes.
Mosgiel, for Mosgiel to town.
When we changed to a new framework called PTOM, a new way of running bus services in 2015, and Mosgiel, Green Island, sorry, the Mosgiel, Green Island, Brighton services were the first ones to go live. So the first of our new routes. And the main thing was that Mosgiel at the time had about 16 different routes. Some of them went to Wingetui, some of them you sort of got dropped off at the train station, had to get on, hop on another bus, blah, blah. So that, what happened in 2015 became one route only, 7 days a week, with clock face timings and all that sort of stuff. So it's at that point we started seeing the growth.
So are you currently running any express buses? Because I thought that was something you were going to be doing. So at the moment, there's no express bus?
No express bus at the moment, but it's something we may be looking to introduce.
Is there any reason why there's no express bus when there's clearly demand?
Well, we've identified that we might need an express bus service and higher frequency. So that's why I just can't confirm right now publicly, yes, we're definitely doing it because there's a funding piece around it. But I think there's a high likelihood there will be an express bus.
Right, yeah, because I mean, that would also tie in with the park and ride. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so for the park and ride, is ORC going to promote that around the buses as well so that those users know about it?
Yeah, it will be something we work closely on with DCC. So with DCC have shown us where they're planning on putting it, and we think we can integrate it very well with the, should it go ahead with the existing bus service. So I don't think there'll be any problem servicing it, yeah.
So how many extra buses, like how often have you had to put the extra buses on?
We put them on every single
day. And the peak times?
At the moment, at peak, yeah. So mornings and afternoons we normally run duplicate services, yeah, apart from school holidays, because a lot of it is school transport. And
would you say it's fair to say that most of those people are commuters who are going into work in town and then come back? Is that sort of the...
So a mixture of commuters and school
right,
kids.
Yep.
So if you were to travel, go to the Mosgiel bus stop at 3:20ish or whatever at the bus hub, you'll see it's absolutely full of school kids here.
Is it possible to do a school run? You know, like, because I know some of the buses do just pick up school, you know, for school kids, which would seem quite safe, a lot safer for the kids, but also less frustrating for the commuters that are just wanting to get to work.
So it's part of the 2015 Regional Public Transport Plan. and the most recent public transport plan, the council signified moving away from offering direct school services, but instead trying to make the existing services fit to serve schools, run as near to them as possible. There's been a couple of exceptions, for example, with Portobello run that diverts in the morning to go past Bayfield School, but generally we try and make the existing service suitable for school kids. It's unlikely we'd do a school-only service, but by
Is there any reason why that you're moving away from that?
I don't know the reasons, specific reasons, no.
Can I just interrupt there, councillor, and let someone else ask a couple of questions? Mr. Pete.
Yeah, just 3 quick questions, Julian. Yeah, thanks for your update. It's very, very good. One, I see on the notes here that you were going to talk about the possibility of East Taieri Loop. Yeah. And number 2, Haggard Alexander Drive, Factory Road. It is a major problem, believe me, because we walk down there quite often, most nights, and that bus on that corner is very, very bad for traffic coming from that left side of things. It's really bad. And the third thing is Haggard Alexander being a route is a hell of a good idea, and the only issue is the width of Haggard Alexander Drive, and maybe it's an issue that could be addressed, that Haggard Alexander Drive could be widened, which it's got the possibility to do, and that would create all sorts of opportunities.
That's not actually going to be anything that the ORC can do anything about, though, is it, Brian?
I have no idea. They obviously have to work with DCC on that route, though, and there's no way that the bus could stop now to allow traffic to go bypass the bus. It wouldn't be possible.
Is that because of cars parked to the side of the road?
That and oncoming traffic. If there's a car parked on either side of Haggard Alexander Drive now, or a bus in the future, then there's no way that 2 cars can pass on that road.
Yeah, I think again, if we were to run something down there, we'd need to discuss it quite thoroughly with.
Good idea though.
Yeah, but
thanks.
What was your
East Taieri Loop?
East
Taieri Loop. I see on the notes here that you were going to talk about the East Taieri Loop.
So it was actually just the East Mosgiel Loop. So basically the loop service that I mentioned that services sort of the retirement homes and the east side of Mosgiel, and then crosses over to the other side of Mosgiel and services the health centre and so on.
What about East Taieri though, up at Kinmont and around there? That's what I think that it was going to be referring to, I thought. No?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the loop around Kinmont or anything, no. It's not something we've got in the works or anything.
There was some information in there, but there was a huge volume of information I sent to Julian, so he might have missed it. I'm happy to follow that up with you later, Julian, if you like.
Yeah, thanks.
I can send that email to you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got one.
Oh, Mr. Miller.
Yes. Thanks, Julian. I'm one of your bus users. Quite satisfied with them. No problem. I'd just like to make a suggestion.
Yeah.
The East Taieri was just brought up. When the bus is coming into town and it comes down Morris Road and it then turns into Kinmont, why not extend it so it carries on round through Kinmont, comes out at the main state highway. Now there's a pedestrian tunnel under the road there, and there's quite a development going on the other side. Now the bus could carry on down to Riccarton Road, turn into Riccarton Road. There's quite a population in there, and then when it gets to Gladstone Road, it could turn right and then head back down past the school. Along that area, there's quite a population of houses and that down there, and then reconnect back up again at the lights. So that would be a suggestion that I'd like you to look at.
So Kinmont, we talk about Kinmont Park, it's just sort of west of the roundabout. Is that?
You know, you come off the Morris Road, you come over the overhead bridge.
Yeah.
You come down and then you turn straight into Kinmont, straight down to the roundabout. Well, instead of turning there, carry on round through on the road through Kinmont that comes out at the main state highway.
Yeah, okay, I know what you mean now.
What do they call that area? Brayside,
I think it's called.
Brayside. Yeah, come out there, and now there's a tunnel under the road there, pedestrian tunnel, for people to go under the road, and there's quite a development of new houses, plus the you can go through to the school and there's the rest homes. And then if the bus turns south and heads to East Taieri and turns into Rickerton Road, where there's quite a population of people there, and travels down Rickerton Road, there's going to be a entry exit from the rest homes coming out there at some time.
Yeah.
You travel down there till you get to Gladstone Road and then turn right, and you follow the right beside the railway line right along till you come back to the traffic lights at the Spaghetti Junction, and then just carry on with the route.
Yeah,
Brian, I think some of that might be in that email that I need to find again and resend to Julian, but that's great that you've been sort of been a bit more expansive on some of the roads and things.
Yeah.
Julian, have you got something you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say yes or no, but I can say that when we look at the revisions to the Mosgiel surface, we've made some notes, and we can take that. We can look at Kinmont and Rickerton Road and so on as part of that. When we look into these things.
That's awesome. I've got the email in front of me, so I will resend that to you. It's got actually some of the streets and roads detailed in it as well.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Any further questions? Well, I just want to thank you on behalf of the board, Julian, and I forgot your colleague's name already, Annie?
Abby, yeah.
Beg your pardon, Abby. Thank you so much for coming along, and I think it's really encouraging to see the increased patronage, the uptake of the B cards. It's a very encouraging sign, and we know how much traffic there is on the road, so the more cars we can get off and people on an efficient bus service, the better. Happy to help Frederick with the B card education sessions if she'd like to run one of those out here.
Excellent. Yeah, sounds great.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for coming.
No problem. Thanks a lot.
For having us.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Right. Now we come to the memorial at East Taieri Cemetery, which we've already had some discussion on. My apologies, I had the wrong page open at the time. But we've had the moved the motion that we will be receiving the report. Scott, would you like to make any comments on that report?
Yeah, I think, thank you, Madam Chair. As I mentioned before, this is an update report on an operational project being led by Parks. In 2020, Mrs. Margaret Van Zyl made a submission to the annual plan and suggested a memorial wall be built at the East Taieri Cemetery. Staff thought it was a wonderful idea and would add real value to the cemetery. It also adds capacity and enables people to memorialise their loved ones for quite some time to come. So we think it's a wonderful idea. We discussed a site with Mrs. Van Zyl as her preferred site, and we agreed that we would investigate that site, but would also investigate others. One of the complex things about managing cemeteries, particularly old and historic cemeteries, is the records are very variable, not overly accurate at times, and there are also the presence of unmarked graves is really typical in old cemeteries. There was a practice common right around the world of burying stillborn babies with no record whatsoever in unmarked graves, sometimes under gardens or hedges, and sometimes in land that was then left undeveloped. So any disturbing of ground in a cemetery, and particularly an old cemetery, has to be done with extreme care and a lot of research first. So we staff undertook that research. We engaged the archivist, DCC's archivist, to search all of the records. Unfortunately, records prior to 1904 don't exist. It's thought they were destroyed by fire. So we got ground penetrating radar out. We assessed the site that Margaret had suggested, and we located some buried objects, some anomalies, and there's a really high likelihood and possibility that they are human remains. So we also agreed to assess other sites in the cemetery should that one not be suitable. We located a lot of buried subsurface anomalies right throughout the cemetery, but we found an area that was clear and free of any of those, and it's only around about 10 or 15 metres away from the site and adjacent to an amenity block at the cemetery. One of the advantages of that site also is it will provide full accessibility for mobility impaired people and folk in wheelchairs with hard surface access right to it. The wall will be built on a concrete pad and that'll adjoin the road. So in all weather, people in wheelchairs and other mobility aids will be able to access it with relative ease. I will just touch on one of the things about disturbing ground where there might be human remains. As you can imagine, there's a lot of cultural sensitivities in disturbing human remains. So when you manage cemeteries, you have to take all of these things into account. And if you don't have to disturb that land where it's shown that there could be buried bodies, then you simply don't. And we've got a perfectly fine alternative. So whilst it's not the original suggested site, it is the site that we will be building the wall on, and we can do so knowing that we're not going to risk uncovering human remains. Happy to take questions on the paper.
So before we take questions, just to make it absolutely clear, I will move that we note the report, just so we get our ducks in a row. So I'm opening up to questions. Mr. Pete?
Yeah, thanks, Scott, for your report and your update. I just would like to make some comments and ask some questions on behalf of Margaret. The GPR results, she has not seen the GPR results that she asked for some time ago. The group through Margaret engaged a local historian who advises that all plots and sites were purchased by the Presbyterians away many, many years ago, and therefore there would be no unpurchased sites. I just leave it at that. Any unmarked graves will not be the Presbyterian ownership. In the report, there seems to...
Have you got a question?
I'm making some comments.
Well, no, this is times for questions. We'll debate after when we get on to noting the report. But this is the time for questions if you've got any. Okay. The question. One of the questions, which sensitivity, Scott, as you probably appreciate, have the local iwi been advised of this current situation? Because there is a suspicion, maybe, or suggestion, maybe, that some of those unmarked graves may be of Maori or Chinese descent. And I'll leave it for that at the moment and for discussion later.
If I may, through the chair, just address the question. It's in terms of the operational management of cemeteries, it's irrelevant of the ethnicity of the buried remains. We won't be disturbing them. So yeah, we haven't specifically consulted with iwi. The site that we're going ahead with has no buried anomalies shown. So we won't be disturbing any. The only way to actually identify remains would be to exhume them and then have them DNA tested, which clearly we're not going to do in this case.
Philippa, you've got a question?
Yeah.
No? Other questions?
Scott, yeah. Can I ask a question?
Oh, yes, certainly, Brian. It's just hard when I can't see you.
Scott, you say that it's all part of the looking after the cemetery and looking after it all. You'll be well aware of the Dunedin City Council's map of the unmarked graves. Now, what surprises me is these unmarked graves are on a roadway. Why are you allowing traffic to travel across unmarked graves? That should be fenced off. And there shouldn't be any vehicles allowed to be going across unmarked graves. Could you reply to that, please?
That was probably more of a statement, Mr. Miller, than a question. But if the question was, why is there a road over what the radar work has shown as subsurface anomalies, is most of the infrastructure at that cemetery and many of the old cemeteries was put in well before technology was available to identify such things. So it's not 100% certain that the subsurface anomalies are unmarked graves, but there is a likelihood that they are. So yeah, the roads existed for quite a long time, I understand, and probably well before the technology was available. But certainly if we were going to be building a new road through that cemetery, we would employ the same technology, and we wouldn't be putting hard infrastructure over the top of it. But yeah, but I can't speak for the folk that built that road.
No, what I'm saying is now that it's been revealed that we have unmarked graves on this map that's been supplied, and there's actually a road going across it, should it not be fenced off and kept the vehicles away from it? Now we know that there are unmarked graves there. Yeah, that's the question. Why isn't it fenced off and stopping traffic travelling over it?
I think you're getting into a whole different issue there, Brian. We're talking about noting the report for the memorial wall. We're not talking about whether we should have fenced off parts of the cemetery. That's another whole debate. This is about us noting the report. Have you got any comments or questions, rather, on noting this report?
Well, he did go into great detail of how they've got to look after the cemetery. And that's the question. Because he brought up the subject of looking after the cemetery, I'd like to know why we're using, not fencing this bit off. Now we know there's unmarked graves there. I think it's despicable that we know they're there and we're continuing on letting vehicles drive across them.
Yeah, I can address that. So the remains, if there were remains under there, are not actually being disturbed. As I say, I wasn't. I'm not aware of when the road was built, but I believe it was a very long time ago. But if you cast your mind to a modern cemetery, like the Dunedin cemetery, or more modern than East Taieri being Anderson's Bay, they're called lawn cemeteries. So you have a headstone on what's called a beam, but it's lawn beyond that. So the grave has a lawn top, and they have lawn mowers driving over the top of them. So it's not, yeah, I think perhaps what you're suggesting is that those, if there were human remains, that would have to be fenced off. We're talking about building the wall and knowingly disturbing an area. We've got the technology, we've used it, and we potentially would be knowingly disturbing it, yeah, which we're not prepared to do.
Thank you, Scott. Sorry, Dean, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks, Joyce. Look, I don't want to be spoil the party here, but we're going round and round in circles. At the end of the day, council have come to the party for a wall that's been agreed upon. Whether it's not her preferred site or not, it's going to happen in that spot. If she doesn't want it there, let's not do it. We're going round and round in circles. It's just what it is. I think we should be grateful that we're getting a wall and moving on.
Yeah, Dean, that was a bit more of a statement as well. That would come later. So unless you've got an actual question, we might, if there are no further questions, then we might move on and take the vote, and then we can have these discussions. Oh, yes, Mr. Pete.
Yeah, my first question to Scott was the GPR results. Why haven't those results been passed on to Margaret and her group?
Through the chair, Mr. Pete, they have been, and I will forward you the several emails with the same attachment on.
Thank you. Right, I've moved it. Do I have a seconder that we note this report? Thank you, Philippa. Right, well, I would just like to speak to that and say that there's been a very comprehensive report, and there's been several, I think at least 3 occasions that Mrs. Van Zyl has spoken to the community board on this matter. She's to be commended for her initiative and for the way she went so diligently about getting the support from the organisations that I actually suggested she go and speak to. I gave her the list and she went round all 8 of them and got the support she needed. She put together a very good submission to the annual plan, and the result is she's getting, they noted that there was a gap here, this needed to be attended to, and we're getting a wall. So I'll be voting in favour of it, as I did before, the very reason that there is a need, and to me, we should be celebrating the fact that through the auspices of the community board, being able to help one of our residents navigate and communicate well with staff, we've managed to achieve getting a memorial wall built, should we progress this. Any other speakers? Mr. Dillon. Mr. Dillon, Martin?
Yeah, I just unmute myself. Yeah, well, that's right. And as far as the brick's concerned, in the cemetery is the RSA memorial, and that's in red brick. So this is in keeping with what's already there. As far as unmarked graves concerned, from personal experience, they are there, and they're in old cemeteries, because I was involved, well, my father was involved in the cemetery in St. Bathans, and we would dig a grave and invariably find another grave. So they were there. And if you've got the technology which we've used, we've found the right site. The brick memorial of the RSA is already there, so it's in keeping with that. Let's just move on.
Thank you. Other speakers? Mr. Pete?
So this is discussion now, it's not questions. Yes?
Yes, it's
Right.
debate.
Okay, just for a question or discussion for Scott. Your proposed wall site is
that going to be a question?
I'm going to ask the question after I've pointed out something, okay?
You can make your statement, but we've finished with the questions.
Okay, so the proposed wall site that you've got there, Scott, do you mean to say that those unmarked graves that are on the roadside, the pathway, will not be disturbed with all the machinery and equipment that you'll be working on that site?
That's a question. Is there any way you can do that without making it a question to Scott?
Well,
do you want to express a concern, perhaps?
I'm expressing a concern that there's some unmarked graves that have been identified by the City Council on their mapping, showing there's 5 or 6 unmarked graves. There's another 6 or 8 or 10 unmarked graves that have not been identified. So my question and suggestion is, why is your wall going to be so close to those unmarked graves, and those unmarked graves will undoubtedly be damaged with your equipment, machinery that's going to be working in that site? So I just open that for discussion, because it is quite a serious issue that those unmarked graves will obviously be damaged.
Well, thank you for expressing that concern. That's I feel like I should let Scott try and clarify anything in there, if you'd like to, Scott.
Yeah, if I may, I believe their cemetery, excuse me, is still open for child burials. I think that's the only burials left. So obviously to do that, you have to get diggers in as well. So there's a lot of marked graves and potentially unmarked graves. So operating some machinery to do some work is not necessarily going to disturb unmarked graves. They're not that shallow that going over the top of them would necessarily damage them, but digging them up certainly would. So yeah, it's
Any other questions?
So,
Is it a question? Oh, beg your pardon, we're debating, sorry.
just in response, please. So the same issue would arise with regards to Margaret's group, where their original site was envisaged. And in actual fact, and where her actual site is, there are no unmarked graves or any such anomalies, because there is a flower pot there, and according to the mapping that the DCC have done, there are no unmarked graves on her site. And yet where you are going to be operating your equipment very, very close to the unmarked graves is a little bit debatable.
Any other speakers?
Yeah, I'd just like to make the comment that I will leave the decision to Margaret. What she wants to do or whether she wants to carry on, it's entirely up to her as far as I'm concerned.
Other speakers? Oh, yes, Pip.
I'd like to have a comment on this. I think, look, I've got a lot of respect for Margaret bringing this forward. I think it's fantastic for the community, and I think it's fantastic that DCC have picked it up. I mean, we've all certainly had many projects that we haven't been able to get funding for. I think, you know, we just need to look at the big picture here. It's 10 or 15 metres moved from the site, that her preferred site. It was never a given. And, you know, I just think we should just go, awesome, that's great, we can get this off the ground. Why are we wasting energy here? I don't quite understand. That's all I've got to say.
Right, there's no further comments. Well, I just note again that it does say in the report that they have discovered, I think it's in point.
Oh, are we sure there's not a
Possibly found.
Oh, sorry.
That's all that they need, I think, is possibly found. My understanding is, for instance, when they're in the process of doing Cemetery Road upgrade, then the heritage people and the archaeologists are fully involved, because it is common practice to find that people with little funding, etc., are buried just on the side or in random places. So as they have done that road upgrade, they've also had to refer back anything that they might turn up. So it is an ongoing issue, and as Scott has pointed out, with the upgrade in technology and the ability to do this, I certainly for one wouldn't want to be the person that said, oh, well, we don't think there's anything in there, and then we start digging, and what do? We find that we've just dug something up, when we've got a perfectly adequate, screened, ready to go site just down there. Now, this is an operational matter. The staff have taken it on board, they've done the investigations, they have presented the report, and so now I'd like to take the vote on the report, that we note this report so that staff can carry on with their work. So, those in favour? Yep, can't see. I've got Mr. Dillon, Philippa, I've got Councillor Houlihan, I've got Mr. McAwee,
And yourself.
and myself. And I'm taking it that Mr. Pete and Mr. Miller are against.
Correct.
I'm not registering against. It's not my decision to make. It's Margaret's decision. If she wishes to carry on.
So are you abstaining then, Brian?
I'm not. Yeah.
So are you abstaining, Mr. Miller?
I couldn't support a report that is not a true and
No,
correct report.
we'll just take that as an abstention then. Thank you. Right. Oh, and now we're on to the naming of new roads off Urban Logan Drive, Mosgiel, and I believe you've all got the very quite detailed reports in your packs about that. So the question is, where are we?
Madam Chair, so it's page 23. So the recommendation from staff is to support the naming of a new road. So there's three choices.
Yes.
Ivy Place is the second alternative of the developer.
Rosella.
Rosella Place is the preferred name, or Rosie Ella Place as the first alternative. So it's just up for if a member wants to move or move one of those names.
Did everyone manage to read the background behind that? I think there's precedent to have living people named, their names used for naming roads. There's an attachment there that it came through council at some point. So that is possible. If you want to look at the boxes, the one that ticks all of them is Ivy Place. The other two tick most of them. So I guess we just need to decide which name we would like to endorse. Would someone like to nominate a name.
Yeah, I'll move that the developer's first choice is allowed.
Okay,
So Rosella Place.
I second that.
Thank you. Any debate on that? Right, all those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. So we can move on. That's easy. Quite a few pages. So now we're on to the Government Support Officer's report. And I believe both Ms Sullivan and Mr McLean will be speaking to various parts. Would you like to?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there's just a couple of things I wanted to mention. Firstly, the representation review. So noting that you'd like to make a submission. So now is the time for the board to craft that submission. Council approved the initial proposal that the structure remain the same. So that's 14 councillors elected at large, 6 community boards with the same boundaries and 6 members elected, and 1 councillor appointed to each board. So I don't know how you want to handle it, Madam Chair, but do you want to talk through the representation review first of all, and then the other matters, or should I mention?
Is that the only one we have to vote for?
Yes.
Shall we just get that off the plate, and then we can. So we did mention last time. This is what Mr Miller alluded to at the beginning of the meeting. We did talk about that the board might want to make a submission. As you can hear from Ms Sullivan, it has come back that there's to be no change. Does the board still want to make a submission?
I would personally wish to withdraw my support for my original motion of making a submission.
Rightio, thank you, Brian. So it seems to be the consensus that we're happy with the outcome of the panel and we don't wish to make a submission. Is that correct?
Well, we haven't got a report in front of us. No one's got a report. I don't know what we've never been given a report. We don't know what I know what they've recommended, but
there was what's Mr Ayres reported back to council.
Yeah, the panel, the report from the panel was shared, I think, with all community board members. I think it was sent out.
It's definitely on the website.
So it's yes. Members are also welcome to make their own submission. I've referred to what the decision of the decision of council was. I haven't had any requests from members for further detail. The information has been out there, but I'm happy to send information out to members. And the council has also extended the time to make a submission until the 4th of October.
So how we'll ask Ms Sullivan to send out any relevant updates for you.
Yeah, I've actually had a look at the report, and quite disappointed actually. There's not a lot in it. I know what we went through, and there's not a lot.
Well, actually, I think it might be helpful. Ms Sullivan might be able to give me the date, but the date that the report was presented back to council.
10th of August.
So if you go back, if you go online and look up the council meeting.
Yeah, I'm just saying I've seen it, but what disturbs me is the fact that it didn't do a great. I mean, we mentioned about rural representation and things like that to them. There's really nothing in it, but what disturbs me is that they've gone on a great spiel of something they had no mandate for, and they even admit it. They say, while not part of the formal representational review arrangement, the panel did ask and receive commitments on the Maori representation, and they've gone into quite detail. I'm not concerned about it being Maori, but the point is they've done very little about what we spoke about, and yet they go into great depth about something they had no mandate to even report on.
What I'm trying to clarify for you, Mr Miller, is that if you were, I know you've read the report, but did you watch the council meeting when the chair of that panel spoke to council?
I didn't. No.
Well, it might be helpful. I'm just saying, it gives you a little bit more context. It might be helpful if you wanted to do that, because he is then subjected to questions from all the councillors, and it does give a little bit more context around just words on a piece of paper. But I hear what you're saying, and if you feel that strongly, then you could possibly put your own submission in.
No, I don't see. The previous one we did was quite a good one. It's quite professional people who understood representation. I don't know whether these people were appointed because of their ability or their qualifications. I'm not sure, I don't know. I think the previous one we went through was had a professor from the university who was understood a lot of representational things. And I'm just disappointed that a lot of the things we discussed amongst ourselves is very, very little. And as far as getting the report, I would have thought our council would have made sure that we got the report for today's meeting.
Okay, well, we've got those concerns noted. Are there any other people that want to comment? Well, it looks like we're not making a submission, so we'll go back to the general business of the GSO report.
Just happy to take any other questions. Just an update that wasn't in here, the staff, in relation to the misspelling of Cofords Road and 12th Tree, so staff are still investigating on the best process of how to handle that. It's unclear whether it was just a mistake by a contractor or whether we actually need to go through a process to formally change the name. So staff are working on that, and as soon as I get that information, I'll let the board members know, and if it does require a report, then that will come to a later meeting of the board. And the request that was made at the last meeting to consider a pedestrian crossing on Haggart Alexandra Drive, so that's been put forward to the transport manager, and they said that noted that there are limited crossing points, and they'll add that road to the list to review in terms of a pedestrian crossing. So that's in hand with transport, so we'll find out in terms of progress on that, but they have got that on their list to review.
Thank you. It's good. It's good that was brought up and some action taken.
So don't know if Scott wants to.
Scott, have you got anything you want to comment on within this report?
No, just assume it's been read. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions regarding the report?
On the report, yeah, just like make comment on the.
Could you speak up a wee bit, please, Mr. Miller? I'll get to you next, Brian, Pete.
Thank you.
Can you speak up, please, Brian Miller?
Oh, sorry. I thought I just want to make a comment on the process for written reports and board updates. I don't know whether you saw my comments I circulated. I think there are some important things that we do that might need motions and that. And as I pointed out, the riverbank thing, and these things need to be archived. We need to have these reports, and they can be archived because people are looking at history now and trying to find out. And then I'll just give you a bit of an example. I got a phone call today about them doing up the fountain in the gardens, and they want to know a bit of history of. They can't sort of find out how things were working, and no one knows. So there's no history about anywhere. But that's just off the cuff. But I mean, the things like I'm using an example like Brian Pete and all the details he's put in. I think that needs to be archived, that and for future reference in years to come. And I think we need to be a bit more sort of relaxed on reports. Some are probably not needed, but there's some that are, and I think that's the way a judgment call should be made, actually, for things like that. I just don't agree that it's got to be all the way it is at the moment. I think we need to be a wee bit more lenient on reports.
Thank you, Brian. At the last board chairs meeting, the CEO did brief all the board chairs on this particular, the summary in this paragraph here. But I'm happy to, at the next board chairs meeting, to certainly raise it in the context that you've just given and see what is said.
Fine.
Okay, Mr. Pete?
Yeah, just I wasn't going to mention about the written reports, but I will now. One of the things that really concerned me, where I was trying to locate what had happened on the Gladstone Road beautification project some 12, 18 months ago when we started with the Silverstream project. I couldn't find any records anywhere in the council. I couldn't ask anyone in the council because no one knew. Only through Brian Miller said that he was involved in the project, and then Lester Harvey. So that's the only way I could find information on how that beautification project transpired. And as we all know, it is a very, very good project. So I finally got a hold of Lester and Brian in the early stages and found out what and how we go about various things. But there's nothing in the City Council records, which is quite sad. So that's just a comment there. The other thing is the the Waihola to Dunedin safer cycle route. I've asked the question through the board, and I haven't had an answer of why was that in the governance report, and who did that report, because I was not consulted. And as you know, on the 9th of June meeting, I was appointed as the project person with regards to that project, and I was never consulted. So how come that report has been in the governance report, but I knew nothing about it?
If I can respond to that. So that report was originally sent through, that's as an attachment that's come from NZTA, from Jonathan Kennett. And it was originally sent through as part of an email from Mr. Pete back in July to go on the July agenda. And so I talked to Mr. Kennett, and so we put that on as an attachment along with the additional information from him that there wasn't any funding. So that's how that got. But it also identifies where there are reports or attachments that come from an outside organisation, like NZTA, for example, or the Regional Council, how those attachments can get in onto an agenda. So that was how that came through.
Is that helpful?
Not really, but we'll move on.
Okay. Are there any other questions regarding
this? The headline, the party in the park.
Yes.
I rang in Chalmers today at 1:45 today, and he tells me he's had no contact whatsoever with any staff members. And
that's okay, Paul.
He also told me that he'd put in a funding application to the board for funding, and I said, well, there's nothing on the in our agenda. So there's two things. Yeah, he's put in a funding application, we don't have it, and also he said he's had no correspondence whatsoever with any.
I can perhaps give you a bit more detail on the funding. Ian did give me a ring and asked about what the process was for funding. He was concerned that we also note that we have close off in end of July and end of November for community. And I said to him, look, all you need to do is fire me an email and tell me that you're interested. And then I told him the process, that he needed to get that application into the GSO, and even if it was a bit later than after the end of July, as long as he'd send me an email saying he was wanting to do it, then we would consider that adequate notice and consider his application. I didn't get an email, and as far as I'm aware, no one at the GSO's office has received an application. So if he's got a copy of it, if he could send it to me, I will follow it up.
Yeah, well, he just said to me, it told me today that he'd put it into the council, that was all. He's
spoken to me, but we haven't seen anything in writing, in an email or anything. So if he has got something that he's written, I'll be more than happy to follow it up.
I'm just relaying what he said to me. The other point
put us goal.
Yeah.
Now, the other question, perhaps Scott might have some input into.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I can absolutely assure you staff have been in touch with with Ian and started to talk to him about the documentation he needs to provide to host the event. So that's health and safety documentation and site layout. And they've also offered to assist him in this case, because we're really supportive of the event and we're keen to see it go ahead. And we've contacted him early in the piece so we can get all that documentation tidied up. So that was just prior to lockdown, and I know staff were looking for times to arrange to meet with him and go through some of that with him.
Well, I'm only just reporting what he spoke to me today, and I read him that point 8, and he said no. But okay, I'm not here to argue with you. Another question is, where's through the board? Where is the Celebration of Excellence project going to be placed? Could you tell me that?
We're working with the group that are doing it. I'm working with Parks, and there's an area between the library and the Senior Citizens Hall, which is very untidy and is in the process of an upgrade. And so as part of the revitalisation of that area, Parks have very kindly agreed to let us use the brick walls there, and they had already planned to upgrade and tidy up the plantings and things. It's a very, very difficult place to grow plants, I'm told, because I'm not a great gardener. But that is the plan, and we will be bringing, the Excellence Group will be bringing you the quotes and the design, etc. at the November meeting.
So you're not looking for any suggestions where to put it then?
Well, we don't need to, because the bonus of this is because it's a tidy up area of the park and those walls are there, Parks are very happy to allow their contractors to put those plaques up for us, which is going to save us a lot of money.
I think I might have found a better place. It doesn't matter if you don't want to know.
Well, perhaps you could come and talk to me about it.
Well, no, look, just as you walk into the library, that wall, that alcove, that's where people walk past and see these things. There's not going to be many people walk past where you're suggesting. Just that alcove there would be a beautiful little spot to put those up there. And
well, we can certainly go and have a look at it, Brian. Thank you for the suggestion. Yeah. Mr. Pete.
I understand that the Friends of the Gardens haven't been approached with regards to where this placard may be put. Do you think maybe that they should be involved in the process?
Are they interested in the process? I haven't heard from them.
Well, they certainly are.
Well, they haven't contacted me, and it's not been a secret.
Would you let me please finish, Madam Chair? I spoke to the chairperson of the Friends of the Gardens last night and asked if she'd had any contact with City Council staff with regards to where the placard will be placed. She's asked on a number of occasions, and even as late as this morning, has still not received a reply from, I think it's Adam Patrick. So I really think you probably should be discussing it with the Friends of the Gardens.
We'll be very happy to talk to them. I think it's Roseanne, is it?
It is too.
Roseanne and I have worked together before. I helped get the picnic table put in the park down in Murray Street. So Roseanne knows all my contact details, and I'd be very happy to talk to her. Mr. Dillon.
Yeah, the point to be made though, the previous community board voted on this and approved that where the plaques to go. So it's done and dusted.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you.
I'd like to comment on your about the governance officer's report about the pool exit and entry, and it states in there that the existing notice of requirement planning, there's no need for a notice of requirement. There's no need for any resource consent. Is that right?
Scott, would you like to reply?
Yeah, well, thanks through the chair. That's correct. The planning instrument is the notice of requirement. The land is designated. So that designation comes with a number of conditions that cover the entry and exit point. And that some of those conditions include consulting with Waka Kotahi, which we are doing and have done. So we are meeting the conditions of the notice of requirement. So our planning team have confirmed that no specific resource consent is required because it is covered by the designation.
Well, I'd like just to make a comment on that. In the report that you got in July 2020 from that Anvizar or whatever they call themselves, who've done all the design working on this for this area, 22-page report. They, in their point 6 of their vehicle access, they discuss the entry and exit, and they state, since this is a district plan clause breach, the activity becomes a restricted discretionary activity. Now, in the 2GP, it describes a restricted discretionary activity. A resource consent is required and can be granted or declined on a case-by-case basis. If the consent is granted, conditions can be imposed, but can only relate to the matters of discretion that the DCC has specified in the district plan or which are specified in national environmental standards or regulations. The matter of discretion are given to the assessment rules in the relevant assessment of restricted activities. Subsection, district discretionary activities may also be subject to performance standards that must be met for the activity status to apply. So under your district plan rules, it clearly states resource consent required for a restricted discretionary activity. Thank you.
Any comments, Scott?
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, but the land's been designated. It's gone through a designation process, Mr. Miller. So advice from our planning team is no specific resource consent. If we follow the conditions of the designation, then we are compliant.
That was never in the designation, the NOR, for that entry, never. In fact, it states in the designation application that the present site would be the one that would be used, and that was backed by Dunedin City Council's council at the hearing.
Well, I think there seems to be an impasse there. You have one point of view, but the DCC planning team seems to have another.
It's not a point of view. I'm reading you out facts.
Well, the DCC planning team are also telling us that the new aquatic facility doesn't require resource consent.
Well,
and that is the report that we have in front of us.
As I said, the council's the judge and jury on its own case.
Comments on the report? Thank you, Philippa. Seconder, please. Thank you, Martin. A tidier version coming out, but it is on there just to remind us about the other areas that we are concerned about and can always be added to if members would like to raise that at any time. We move on to board updates. Keep Dunedin beautiful, Philippa Bain.
Yeah, we've got a change of date for clean-up week, so that's been postponed to the 25th to the 31st of October. The Keep New Zealand Beautiful National Awards have been postponed, no date given yet. And our AGM's been postponed to the 11th of October. And I've also spoken to Asham about your query, Brian Miller, about DCC rural roads. They have come back to me and said that it is a transport. If there's any roads that you've got issues with, it's the transport department. But if you'd like to facilitate a cleanup, that transport are quite willing to help. And so is KDB with those cleanups. They can be a little bit tricky on those roads that are of high speeds in regards to health and safety. So you need to have a little bit of a plan before that they can commence. So maybe that's something that you and I could discuss for cleanup week in October.
Thank you for that.
That's all from me.
Thanks, Philippa. Brian Miller, Friends of the Gardens.
Yeah, I'd just like to remind the board that the Friends of the Gardens was instigated by the board. And I think there should be anything that's going on or any projects for it certainly should be run past them. And I'll move a resolution here and now that the council consult with the Friends of the Gardens and get their approval for the placement of the this excellent project. I'd move that as a resolution. That they.
Have we got a seconder?
Yes.
Do you want to speak to it, Brian?
Oh, well, I've spoken to it just
No,
before.
no,
So
the other Brian. Sorry, I should have said Mr.
I
Mark.
think out of a courtesy, we've got to, we organise a group to take it over and try and help us out and do all the rest. And we just seem to be putting them on the back burner somewhere. If there's, if what Mr. Peters said about the contact they tried to make, and I think they should be first port of call, actually, if you're going to put anything in there, really, just to have a discussion with them.
Other people want to speak?
Thank you.
Thank you, Philippa.
I totally agree, but we've had no, well, myself and Joy have had no correspondence with anybody reaching out to talk to us about the project. The project is from the past, as Martin Dillon mentioned, it is something that's been moved with the last board. So it's before the group were established. We are delighted that the group is established, and we are also very excited to be working with them for many projects. However, Celebrating Excellence project, as Martin said, has already been decided on with the prior board.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, I think my understanding of the Friends of the Gardens, and that is only my understanding, is that it's an advisory group and that council were keen to work with them and perhaps help them establish themselves so they could get some funding, or maybe work with council in terms of adopting an area or other options like that. These aren't set in concrete, these are just some of the proposals that were put out. But my clear understanding was that they are not to be approving what goes in and out of the garden. That is an operational matter for park staff. So, Scott, have you got anything to add?
No, that sums it up nicely. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So, beg your pardon, Councillor Houlihan.
I can't get my mute button. Yes, that's what I was going to say too. I think we've got to be careful if we've got a group that are there to do the gardens and doing, and I thought it was fantastic, the amount of support and people that came forward to do that. And I think well done for organising that. It was great. And I think they'll be quite busy with all their projects, but I think that's out of the directive of the group to be giving approval of things that are operational for council. I think we've got to be very careful with that sort of thing. You know, you can't give other people sort of, I mean, under our council, you know, like you can't actually give an external group operational power to approve or disapprove. It has to go through council. So, or like in this case, it's come to our board. I would question the legality of that, but I think where it's appropriate is when there's things that are on in the gardens. Obviously, it makes sense to say to them, "Oh, look, we've got this on. Do you want to be involved, or is there any concerns your group has about that?" And then those concerns could be heard. I think that's important. But with this issue, this is a separate one again. But this, as everyone said, has been already agreed, and so I think it would become quite complicated to bring that up. Thank you.
Oh, have I missed any? Oh, Mr. Pete.
yeah, just a simple question. Has the community ever been consulted with regards to where this plaque may be placed?
No, because that would open a tremendous can of worms, and we just want to get this project over the line. The community was thoroughly canvassed 3 or 4 years ago when we first raised the idea of celebrating excellence. There was wide publicity. There was a great deal of community interest. Once the nominees were approved by the board in the last triennium, they were announced on Talk on the Taieri, they were announced in the Star. It was widely publicised. Since then, we've stalled with COVID and other things, and so it's really imperative that we get this across the line. I take your point about Friends of the Gardens, and I'm very happy to get together with Roseanne and have a chat to her and her group. The point is, my understanding is, there's been some survey being run about it, but we weren't consulted about that either. And we haven't been informed about what the results of that survey were. And I just think it's disappointing that people perhaps head off on a tangent without talking to the direct people concerned who are actually driving the project. So they need to perhaps come and talk to us, and we can get our facts all together. And I'm sure with their passion for the garden, there'll be some very helpful ideas and ways forward. But this particular project is ready to go. Is there anything else? We just need to vote on this.
I'd just like to add to that.
Yeah.
They've had 2 public meetings. It's been rather disappointing to see that only 2 community board people considered to go along. I mean,
where did they
a lot of these things
publicise?
could have been, a lot of these things could have been talked about and open to the public, and any community board member could have gone along. And
Well,
it's
it
a
might
community
be,
board
perhaps it would have been helpful, Brian, if they advised the community board members of the meeting.
Well, they were advertised. It was advertised.
Where was it advertised?
I think it was advertised on a Facebook page. On the
If you're not on that particular
on the Gardens Facebook page.
Oh, but then if you're not, that's not going to get the wider public, is it? So look, we're getting off on a tangent here.
Well, they managed to get a whole heap of people there, and I mean.
Well, that's wonderful, but it's not going to.
Point of order, please.
Point of order, Mr. Page.
So which topic are we actually talking about? Friends of Gardens, is that finished, or are we talking about celebrating excellence?
We were talking about Mr. Pete's motion, Mr. Miller's motion regarding that Friends of the Gardens would have some authority in terms of telling council how to operate the gardens.
I thought it was just discussion, but never mind. Okay.
No. So we'll get back to that. Thank you for bringing us back into that, though, Brian. We'll get back to actually voting on it. So just to clarify, Mr. Miller, we're voting. You're asking that the Friends of the Gardens have some authority in terms of what happens in the gardens. Is that what you're saying?
I never mentioned the word authority.
Well, thank you. Then just clarify.
Well, I think they should be asked for their approval. That's the group's approval. That's the group's approval. Whether you do it or not, it's irrelevant. It's their group's approval. Whether that's not taken as dictating anything to council. That's just saying what they feel.
Yeah, I think we could say that they are consulted, but I don't think we can ask for their approval.
Be very nice to get it.
Are you happy for us to move that they are consulted?
Well, to a point, but sometimes I know what the council's consultation means, not a lot.
Yeah. Well, I think that's...
I'd take it in good faith, that I would. If it's given in good faith, I'll take it in good faith.
Right, well, let's try and get some appropriate wording here. So we're moving that in matters relating to the Memorial Gardens, the Friends of the Gardens group are consulted. Is that what we...
Yep.
Okay, that's the motion.
I just remind that no doubt they'll have a meeting and they'll advertise it, so all the board's welcome to go along and put their pennies worth in. Go for it. That's what it's for.
Okay, Mr. Pete, are you happy to second that motion?
Yes.
Clarified. Right.
Yes.
So that's seconded. Can we vote, please? I think we've had enough discussion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Two. I can't. Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, I've got Mr. McAwee, Mr. Dillon, Mr. Pete, Mr. Miller.
Can I just clarify?
One moment.
Madam Chair, what the in terms of being consulted, is that in relation to what, or is it on anything
In the Memorial Gardens?
I just wonder whether we should get Scott's advice.
All right.
Can I say I think that's very broad. That I would be concerned about that.
Right, thank you. Let's get Scott and then we'll get some clarification. Is that all right, Scott? Are you able to help us with this?
Yeah, thanks through the chair. Yeah, I'd be, I wouldn't be supportive of having to consult every time we did anything in the garden for obvious reasons. So we've been in touch with them. They know our budgets. They know our budgets are fixed. And they know our maintenance program. So if we're working with the group, we're giving them all the material on how they can become an incorporated society in terms of being able to then raise additional funds if they want to see additional things, amenities going into the garden. But certainly if there was any operational activity that was sort of significant and was going to be disrupting the use and enjoyment of the garden for any significant amount of time, we would inform them.
But given that we've had that undertaking from the group manager of parks, do we even need this motion?
Well, I think there needs to be a reminder that these things are all assets of the people of Dunedin.
Yeah.
And the council are there to administrate it.
Yeah.
So
I hear you, Brian, and I think you've made that point very clearly, and you've made it in a public meeting, which is being recorded. So I think that's probably sufficient, unless there's any significant pushback from any other members. Okay, then we will just let that motion lapse. Thank you.
no, put it forward. Put it.
You want to put it?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, so we're putting the original one about consulting.
Yep.
Rightio, I think we might take this by division. So you need to unmute yourself and tell me what you're doing. Those in favour that the Friends of the Gardens group be consulted around activities related to Memorial Park.
Would you like me to call that?
Yes, we'll call the names out.
Thank you. Philippa Bain.
Yes.
Mr. Dillon.
Yes.
Councillor Houlihan.
No.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Page.
Yes.
Madam Chair.
No.
That's 5-2, so it's carried.
You haven't asked me yet.
Oh, sorry,
Jean.
sorry.
No.
5-3. Is it?
Yeah, 5-3.
So that motion's carried.
Can I just clarify? Does this mean that whenever the council needs to do anything, it has to go and consult with
Point
this
of order.
group?
Point of order, please, Madam Chair.
Point of order, Mr. Pete.
I think that vote has been taken. There's no discussion now, is there?
Move on.
It hasn't been.
I was trying to clarify what the implications of that are.
I haven't actually said it's carried yet.
So
Well, the
I think
governance
that's,
officer did.
I think that's Scott.
before that was before Mr. McAway.
Yeah, we hadn't taken Mr. McAwee's vote at that point. I think, having heard from the group manager of parks, his concerns around it and the scope that it would possibly give, that is I think where you're coming from, Councillor Houlihan, and that's where I'm coming from as well.
Am I able to speak for a second to get clarification? Can a board vote on something that the council as a whole has to do? I don't think we can. I don't think we have, because that's stepping on operational matters. I don't think we have that authority here. I don't think
That's
our
a point
vote
of
is
order.
actually valid.
The
That's a
vote
point
has
of order.
been taken.
You wanted to make that.
You closed the debate. You've closed the debate and you're halfway through the vote. Carry on.
I would prefer it if you didn't shout over the top of me, Mr. Miller. We're going to adjourn for a few moments and we'll come back to you. So you're going to just time out for a wee bit while we check this out and we'll get back to you.
So Mr. Hayton, we're adjourning the meeting.
Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. We've had some looking at the rules and regs and consulting, and Ms. Sullivan's going to give you a response.
Thank you. So the motion is essentially to direct staff to consult with the Friends of Memorial Gardens. That's not a valid motion because the board cannot direct staff to do that. If the board wished to pass something similar, it could request that staff look at consulting with the Friends of the Memorial Gardens in relation to matters that may affect the gardens. That would be a suitable motion, but the motion to consult is not a valid motion because it is directing staff, and the board does not have the delegated authority to do that.
Everyone okay with that?
Yes. Could I make a suggestion for a motion?
Certainly.
Just that I was going to say that the board would like it noted that the Friends of the Memorial Gardens are informed where possible on any anything to do with the Memorial Gardens. So informed on if there's activities or certain things happening. So.
Madam Chair, if I could suggest that it requests that staff consider informing, because the initial request that staff consider rather than
because we can't direct staff.
Yeah.
So you're happy with that, Councillor Houlihan?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. So Councillor Houlihan's put that motion, which when Ms. Sullivan's had a chance to scribble it down, will read back for us.
So the motion is that the board requests that staff can consider informing the Friends of Memorial Gardens on matters that relate to the Memorial Gardens.
Seconder, thank you, Mr. Pete.
He's on mute.
You're on mute. Hang on.
Okay. There now?
Yes, can hear you.
Yeah, are you seconding the motion?
No, I just want to question, is this an amendment to the motion? Because the motion was carried, it was passed, and now is this an amendment to the motion or not?
Ms. Sullivan?
Madam Chair, the motion was not declared carried. The motion has actually just you ruled it's invalid. My advice is that the original motion was invalid, so could not be put. So this is a new motion from Councillor Houlihan.
Maybe we could go back to the transcript because I believe that the motion was put, carried and passed. Never mind, carry on.
Philippa.
I just want to point out we're missing a board member.
Pardon?
I just want to point out we're missing a board member.
Oh,
Who's that?
we are too. Jean's not here.
That might be. Yes, right. Is that his name? Mr. Hayton, do you want to take a adjourn?
We'll have to adjourn for a minute while we find out where Mr. McElwee's disappeared to. Please, if we could do that.
Joy, as chairperson, I think
Thank you.
Thank you.
On the advice of Ms Sullivan, I will have to declare the previous motion invalid due to the fact that community board members are not in any way given the authority to direct staff. So that motion is lapsed and gone, and we're now looking at.
There is a motion on the table from Councillor Houlihan that the board request that staff, put a request to staff to consider informing the Friends of the Memorial Gardens when there is significant work to be undertaken on the gardens.
Do we have a seconder for that?
Oh yeah, let's move on.
So Mr Pete seconded it.
Yes.
I think we've had enough discussion, unless anyone's got something desperate they need to say.
Yeah, can I just make one little comment here? And standing orders under Principles 1.1, item 3, with regards to how we should conduct ourselves, make itself aware of and have regard to the views of all its communities. I just make that point.
Thank you.
Did you want to put the?
Yes, so we're voting on that now. All those in favour?
I
think we'll go by division again because I cannot see Mr McElwee, so I'll get Ms Sullivan to call the names out.
Philippa Bain.
Yes.
Mr Dillon.
Yes.
Councillor Houlihan.
Yes.
Mr McElwee.
Yes.
Mr Miller.
Oh, my goodness.
Mr Miller. He's not there. Mr Pete.
yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
Carried 6 with 6. No, so declare it carried.
we can declare it carried, but we need to find.
Might take.
We're going to have to stop again, I'm sorry, while we find out where Mr. Oh, hang on, has he come back in?
Yep.
Well, he's back now. Do I need to take it back? Right, that's carried then. Okay, I don't think the next item was celebrating local excellence. I think we've covered that in just about every
Just
other form.
a point of order here, and I don't know whether I'm correct or not, but I just raise it anyway for discussion or just to see if I'm correct. In the standing orders 20.14, adjournment motions, the carrying of any motion to adjourn a meeting must supersede any other business remaining to be disposed of. Any such business must be considered at the next meeting. Business referred to or referred back, specified meeting or local community board is to be considered the next ordinary meeting of that community board, otherwise specified. Is that suggesting that we cannot carry on our meeting because we've adjourned?
We'll just, Ms Sullivan.
Call for adjournment and one.
I need to call for another adjournment. I should really have a seconder.
To roll on point of order.
To roll on that point of order.
Just add a seconder.
Yeah, seconder for that, please. Thank you.
Sorry.
We're good to go again, Paul. Okay, thank you for that point of order. I'll be ruling against it because we're not adjourning the meeting as such. We've been taking regular adjournments to get advice from governance staff, and that's common practice. So we'll move on.
Thank you.
No problem. 11.3, celebrating excellence. As I said, I think we've covered that pretty much on different levels. So if everyone's happy, we'll move on to Mr. McElwee and Hawke and Hurl.
Okay, you can obviously hear me now, Joy.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, no, sorry, I've lost some visual. That's okay. Hawke and Hurl, obviously, last time was cancelled due to COVID, and it looks like, unfortunately, it's going to happen again. It was supposed to be the 9th of October, but we're 2.5–3 weeks away. I spoke to Graham Robinson from the Torrey Lions, which we're partnering with it. Short time frame, and with the COVID level the way it is, they would like to pass on it and probably reassess and do it early in the next year. So I've rung Lee, left a message with her, and looks like that's what we're going to be doing.
Was it some suggestion that we might try and do some activity around the clean-up week?
Yes, I spoke to, well, I've left a message with Lee. She hasn't got back to me. That was 2 days ago.
Okay. All right. Well, that's disappointing, but understandable in the short time frame. If you're going to do it, we want to do it properly. Yeah. Well,
yes,
we'll just see,
absolutely.
we'll see what Lee comes back with, and we'll keep talking to KDB and see if we can do something around the clean-up week.
Yes, no problem.
Okay. So I'll leave that with you then, Dean, to follow up with Lee.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can, Brian.
Only just now. I've been trying to get you, but for some reason I've been cut off.
No, we've only just heard you now.
Yeah, well, for some reason I've been cut off. There's other issues further up that I'd want to discuss before you get on to. I'd like to bring up something about the celebration of excellence for a start. Can you assure me that the people who have been nominated have given their approval?
The nomination forms have been signed by the nominators.
No, they haven't.
By the nominators.
By the nominator. I'm asking you, the people that have been nominated, have you got their approval?
I took that on trust, Brian. It seems that this has been very widely canvassed. It was all over the media. If those people were unhappy, I think we would have heard by now.
You haven't had the courtesy to ask the people if they wish to be put forward.
I'm ruling that this has been widely canvassed. We've talked about it a lot tonight. The fact that those people were nominated, had their names all over the media, and everyone seemed delighted. Nobody came back to the board saying they didn't want to be nominated. I take that as approval. Well, we're going on to the next item now, Brian.
You've just gone on about invalidating my resolution. I'd like to challenge that, and Martin Dillon brought up about all this was done in the previous board. And I believe that the resolution by the previous board should be invalidated, and I'll read it to you.
Brian, we're not going there.
No, just Joy Davis and Sarah Nissis.
We're not going there, Brian.
People.
You can say that you're mute.
I'm going to put you on mute now, Brian.
Sarah Nissis was a nominator. She should not have been allowed to take part in the board.
Oh, can we cause an adjournment?
You want another one?
Well, you can't talk.
You don't want to listen, do you?
He's got to stop me.
Brian, I've asked you to.
You went.
Brian, I've ruled, and you're continuing to talk over the top of me. So if you're going to continue to do that, then I'll have to mute you, and we'll carry on with the next item.
Do I have permission to talk?
No, I've ruled that we're moving on to the next item.
Well, it's very important, but you ruled an invalid resolution before, and I believe that the invalid resolution moved previously.
For the third time, I have ruled that we're moving on to the next item. Would you please respect that?
Well, you had already had muted me and I couldn't take part.
I hadn't muted you.
I was. When we came back on from that adjournment, I was muted. And I spoke several times and I got no reply from you. I wanted to speak and I got no reply and I'd been muted.
Point of order, please. Point of order.
Mr. Pete.
Bearing in mind that Mr. Miller was not available, as you did with Dean, you allowed Dean to come back in. Surely I think he should be given the opportunity to say what he would like to say, please.
I'm ruling against that point of order because Mr. Miller has said what he needed to say, and he said it several times, in fact, most of the time over the top of me. So I'm not going to uphold that point of order. There's been ample opportunity up until now. We've talked about celebrating excellence uphill and down Dale tonight, and there's been ample opportunity to cover things. I've given him that further opportunity and respectfully asked him not to speak over the top of me, which he continues to do. So, Mr. Miller, do you want to cease from speaking and we can move on to the next item, or will I have to press the GSO to press the mute button?
I want to speak about the celebration of excellence that I was muted out of.
You were not muted out. There must have been a technical issue, but nothing happened at this table.
Granted, you're probably quite right, it was a technical issue, but when we came back from the adjournment, I was muted out. And I tried several times to speak and you people weren't getting the message. So I was actually cut out of the meeting. I think I should have a right to speak.
And I think you just have. You've raised the point about nominees and nominators, and I've heard those points, and I've pointed out to you that this has been widely canvassed, that this was covered in the last triennium, and that there is not going to be any more debate on it now. We're moving on to the next item. So we're on to 11.5, Coronation Hall. Mr. McElwee.
Thanks, Joy. Obviously, due to COVID, we postponed, well, the AGM was postponed. Mr. Miller was wanting a report brought to the board of financials. That's still going to happen. Caught up with Robert Cochrane, and he will get that forwarded to clear as soon as possible. But as I say, the meeting was postponed due to COVID. So no more further update than that.
Thank you. Item number 6, Mosgiel Aquatic Project, Mr. Miller.
Well, I think there's been a fair bit of information out there. There's not much progress being made. There's looking for pipes and things they got to replace. I don't know whether they've got any dead bodies under there. They might have to. But fine. Maybe there's a tanifer there that we've got to watch out for. But there's nothing really to report, and I think information's all at the library for those who want to look at it. I would suggest, though, that I did ask for those reports to be distributed amongst the board. They don't appear to have been done. And
can I just clarify, is that the reports from your committee?
No. The reports from that when I quoted before that the council got was it ANZA, or the report, a 22-page report on it. There's also another 2 or 3 reports that are available that have never been distributed. And I'd like to move a resolution here that the council supply the general public with information on the signalised crossing so they know a bit more about it. It's only appeared to have gone round about letterbox drop around people around the area, and I think the people of Mosgiel as a whole need to have a wee bit more of an explanation of what's going to happen.
Okay, thank you for that. I just want to clarify, the reports that you're talking about, are they publicly available?
Well, no, I had to get it under the Official Information Act. And council refused to give it to me, and I got it from Transit New Zealand.
Okay, thank you for that information. I might just, Scott, are you able to give us any informational updates around this? If not, that's fine, but.
No, I can briefly on the pool in general. Yeah, but I know that several hundred households were informed of the road crossing. Yeah, but in terms of the pool itself, building consent's been issued, and as Mr. Miller indicated, that the exact sequence of construction activities is being finalised, but relocation of underground services is likely to be one of the first activities.
So basically what we're saying is that the decisions have been made and the project is progressing.
Correct.
So there isn't any point in rereading reports then? Would that be the case? Is it not going to add to the conversation if the decisions have already been made and the project is progressing?
That would be correct, yes. We don't need resource consent for that entry and exit point, if that's what Mr. Miller is referring to. So yeah, the project is progressing. Okay,
so I'm considering then, Brian, that if the project is already done and progressing, and those 200 people have been informed, I'm not quite sure of the point in putting this extra workload on staff to get reports out to people when the project is already, decisions have been made and it's moving forward.
I'll just give you an example of, there was no public notification much on the Mosgiel-Taieri roundabout, and look at the outcry you've had there. Now you're doing a major one on a state highway, and I think the people of Mosgiel you have an obligation to the people of Mosgiel to inform them of what you're going to do.
I think they've been pretty well informed from my understanding. I think they have been well informed. I think actually, were you not on the front page of the Star informing them about that?
Did you?
Mr. Pete?
Yeah, just a question for Mr. Miller or Scott. Is the project now going to still be on track for just a loss of one season, or are we not on track with timetables?
I'd say
through the chair, just I'd have to speak with the construction company, Cook Brothers, to get a finalised timeline. They're just finalising the sequence of events at the moment, so I can't give you that tonight, but can do as soon as I have it.
Thank you.
Thanks. We'll note that to follow up. So I'm just really not sure that there's any it's helpful at all to put that motion of yours, Mr. Miller.
yourself.
Okay. So is that all you had for the aquatic facilities project? I'll take it that's a yes. So Mosgiel-Taieri number 8, the emergency group. Our Civil Defence Emergency Management Officer, Paul Allen, has been redeployed. He's got a new position. He's now Group Manager of Welfare and in charge of resilience planning across Otago. So he's now not going to be one of the active emergency officers that comes out and supports groups like ours. They are having a staff change in there, and there'll be 2 new officers appointed. Don't know who they are yet. And the response group will be having, hopefully, COVID willing, a meeting to just go through all the equipment and check on codes and access and things like that at the Taieri Bowling Club, which would be our normal flooding and everything else willing. That would be our normal base. So we're getting together just to make sure everyone's au fait with what's there and how to get in and out. And that's coming up in October. So it's just ticking along quietly, and hopefully it's not going to be needed. That leads us to the Outram Emergency Group. Dean?
No real updates. Obviously, Paul Allen, as you've stated, has moved on, so we're await the new staff member to come out and have a chat with us. But obviously the generator line has been put into the rugby club, which I might have briefly mentioned last time. And I think there's a group which have just purchased a generator. So things are slowly ticking away, but as I say, we haven't met with Paul, obviously. We'll look forward to that new staff member making contact shortly.
Okay, thank you very much. Silver Stream plantings, Mr. P.
Yeah, as you know, I've sent round all my reports, written reports, because I felt that there was a hell of a lot needed to be covered. I've been in discussions with Scott with regards to health and safety risk management, which I passed all that information on to him, and I've sent it all out to you guys. The only regret I have is that the public don't see where we're at, which I'll come back to on the Facebook page later. But the plantings and the work from the corrections people has ceased because of COVID, and I've just had a confirmation from the corrections people that as soon as COVID allows, they'll be back in business clearing the banks. So that's about all from the plantings.
Any questions, anybody? Mr. Dillon.
Yeah, Brian, who's taken over the cutting of the grass, looking after it?
Cutting of the banks, you mean? Or
yeah, the ones have you already planted, because the grass is higher than the plants.
yeah, it's part of the deal with the corrections people when they can get back to the jobs.
So they'll be maintaining it.
Yeah. Although I've asked Scott and ORC to have it clarified of who's responsible totally for the bank's silver stream.
And so when do you hope to have that?
Don't know. I've been waiting for 12 months.
Yeah, okay.
Can I just ask, I had a look on those at the documents, and the corrections one, it seems to be an agreement between you and corrections.
Project and corrections.
Yeah, well, it doesn't say that on the front. It says Brian Pete on the front.
As a project manager, yeah.
But it doesn't say that though, and I'm just concerned that if anything went custard-like, you might be liable.
Oh gosh. Righto.
Well, it just says your name. It doesn't say on behalf of, or in brackets, or
I think it does talk about this project, but I'll get that clarified. That's not an issue. Yep.
Thank you. And the other thing was the other two documents. There doesn't appear to be anything in them. I mean, I might not be au fait with reading them very well, but they seem to be blank.
Which one's this?
The safety documents that you sent round. There doesn't seem to be any detail in them.
The detail is
templates.
The templates of, yes. So that, yeah. So we're covered with regards to those templates when and if we have Taieri colleges or the Silver Stream School or whoever working, we will have that. Those templates will cover that. Those people.
So you'll just populate them with the details of whichever group it is.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That clarifies that. Thank you.